Welcome to In Production, conversations on the research and development of time-based artworks. Hosted by MPAC's engineering and curatorial staff, we talk to artists, technicians, curators, scholars, and makers associated with the production of new work here at the Curtis R. Priam Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center on the campus of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. Through interdisciplinary exchange, this podcast series provides insight into the creative and technical act of producing artistic works by those who work backstage and behind the camera. My name is Amadeus Julian Regucera. I am the music curator here, and I'm joined by our curator-in-residence for dance and theater, Tara Willis, and our time-based visual arts curator, Katherine Adams. And we're going to talk a little bit about our spring 2025 season, which we're all very excited about. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
And yeah, I think maybe we'll just start with a little overview of what we all got going on. I know that we have a pretty full season. And I'm particularly excited about Tara, your festival, but we'll get to that in a minute. But Katherine, why don't you start us off? What kind of projects do you have, and coming up this spring, and what kinds of things are you excited about?
Yeah, thanks so much. So I have a number of projects across residencies and public programs. I'd say the biggest is a new commission with the choreographer and theater maker Jack Ferver called My Town, which is thinking about the small town as a kind of portal to think about like larger questions of community and subjectivity. And so Jack is kind of like queering the traditional American play Our Town. That's a project that will also have a really elaborate like virtual scenography. So there's video production by Jeremy Jacob that will kind of frame that project. And then some other things that I have, a few projects are kind of starting up in residence with us within the kind of film video realm. So yes, we've got a few residencies, Peace staff, Claudia Paguez and Korakrit Arunanondchai. I think Korakrit's project will be especially exciting because that's going to be a sort of experimental screening performance trying to imagine cinema through a kind of atmospheric environment. So rather than thinking about a traditional theatrical screening, there will be a lot of use of like projection onto fog, and kind of the performers will sort of emerge and disappear in this kind of ghost-like way in that project, and is related to Korakrit's kind of interest in like traditions of cinema in Thailand specifically, and the way that cinema was brought into areas of Thailand, and how it kind of connects back to spirituality in the region. But yeah, so that's a quick summary of mine, and I would love to pass it over to hear more.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I think that there is a through line of theatricality in this season, dramaturgy. I have a big commissioned performance by composer Rama Gottfried with performers Yarn Wire, this contemporary music, percussion, and piano quartet, although not a lot of percussion or piano, I think. Lots of electronic sounds, lots of textures, but Rama has been in residence at MPAC 2 times now to really work with the theater's line set and rigging system to create a sort of floating, kind of dreamy but playful dramaturgy with the technology. This sort of ever-shifting scenography that is just like very whimsical. We've got critters and camels and plants and insects, and just this kind of really a biome of music and theater. I also have performances from electronic music pioneer Tara Rogers, whose book, Pink Noises, about women in electronic music, is a really sort of important text in the field. And performances by Peter Evans' newest band, Being and Becoming, this really sort of searing improvisational quartet, coming out of jazz and contemporary experimental music practices. And speaking of contemporary music experimental practices, Victoria Shen and Miriam Rezai, whose primary instruments are the turntable, will be coming in April to do a fantastic, sort of very thrilling, visceral performance. They start with the turntable, but it really becomes something else entirely, something outrageous, something kind of aggressive, but also very just a stunning use of the turntable and what the possibilities for turntablism could be. Very exciting festival from our curator-in-residence, Tara Willis. And yeah, so Tara, I spoke a little bit about this through line, this sort of dramaturgical through line, but tell us a little bit about what we can expect from this festival.
Thanks, Amadeus. First of all, it's so exciting to hear about all of your work, because I feel like every time I talk to you all, it's been about my festival. It takes up a lot of airtime. So I'm really happy to hear a little bit about what you're working on. The festival is called Ephemeral Organ, and it's technically already sort of started this fall. We had a couple of amazing talks. Well, one of them was definitely amazing. The other one I gave, so who's to say? But we had Shanae McElwain-Holloway here last month in November, giving a wonderful talk about at the end of her residency. And she'll be around in April when the festival moment really happens, to hang out with everybody. But the festival's focused on 2 performance projects and 2 talks, each by different artists. We had also this fall a wonderful residency with Chicago, Illinois-based artists Catherine Simone Reynolds and AJ McLennan, who are collaborating on transforming a set of video works they made, commissioned by The Kitchen in New York, back in very much COVID era, when things needed to be on video rather than live, and they're turning it sort of finally into a live performance. It has blossomed into a house in Studio One with, that is an installation with video works that were made back when the piece was commissioned, that will be on view over both days of the festival, April 17 and 18. But on the 17th, the Thursday of the festival, there will be many different sort of each unique intermittent performances, short performances over the course of the day. So I highly recommend you come that day as well as Friday. And then the other main sort of linchpin of the festival in terms of performance work is Lesie Cuyjet, another work that was originally presented at the Kitchen as well, actually, but it was done, in a space that was kind of a white loft, painted white loft space, something between a gallery and a home. And so Lesie is really working in our theater here at MPAC to scale it up a bit, or at least, think about it in relationship to that sort of dark box that a theater provides. And I'm really excited about getting to have this work witnessed again. The piece is called With Marion, and grapples like Katherine and AJ's piece with some very clear dance history and archival material. AJ and Katherine are dealing with Blondell Cummings archives and responding to that. Lesie is grappling with her great aunt, Marion Cuyjet, who pioneered dance education for Black folks in Philly in the 50s. And so those are the 2 kind of performance works, and there's 2 performances of Leslie's piece on Friday. So, it's come for both days, of course, but also, we've got kind of 2 temporalities going on here, which I think is emblematic of how the festival thematic is framed in my mind. I'm really excited to think about MPAC, the building that MPAC is, with all of these different theater spaces inside of it, as a kind of body, as a space, an architecture that these artists are inhabiting in different ways. And in fact, I mentioned there's a house in Studio One for Kat and AJ's piece. Lesie has also got a kind of enclosure that has projection on it around her body in her piece. So there's this play that I think is happening across the works with kind of the artists creating their own architecture as a way of obscuring, protecting, presenting their bodies in relationship to movement and gesture. And the theme, Ephemeral Organ, comes from language surrounding the idea of archives, the body in motion. Obviously, organs really refer to the body, and as well as the kind of architecture through line I've already mentioned. But that idea of ephemera and the materials that show up along the way as we are composing a dance, but also that that artists are drawing on when they look back at history and think about legacies, lineages, in terms of artists that have come before them, family, etc. But also just thinking about the relationship of the body in motion to time and the past, and how there's always this kind of, we think of, movement and dance as having this sort of forward momentum a lot of the time, but often you're really drawing on a body of knowledge that is deep and well-worn and built over time. Which is precisely what I think another artist giving a talk in April, Justine A. Chambers, is grappling with in her talk. She's going to share with us about her piece, The Brutal Joy, which has been touring Canada over the past year. And she is, this piece is drawing on childhood memories of doing the electric slide at, or different line dances at family functions as a child. And, so there is this kind of Black family home space that is showing up also, literally, some of these pieces in that way. But also for Justine, there is this sort of layering of memory on the body and drawing on that she's going to dig into. What are the sort of strategies for choreographing herself that are showing up and choreographing those memories into her body movement? And then last but not least, Stephanie Jemison is currently actually in the building right now working on sort of translating or iterating a performance that she did earlier this year. In relation very much to the camera. She's doing a video shoot and going to be creating a ton of material next week with dancers and a giant jungle gym and blue screen. And so I'm really excited to hear Stephanie talk about that piece in the second talk of the festival next spring. She draws often on archival materials, thinking about how people over time and at different moments in history, especially through sort of mysterious stories where the detail of it can't quite be discerned from the archival materials, journalism that might have been made about it, et cetera. And so she's drawing on certain stories to create this piece with the dancers. That was a lot of detail.
Yeah.
I launched into it.
Yeah.
Sorry, once it starts coming, it just doesn't.
No, I mean, a lot of interesting things you mentioned. I think something I want to hone in on, and, Katherine, I'd love your input on this too, is we always talk about the production capabilities of the building, and something that's interesting for me, especially, you mentioned Kat and AJ building a house, or the staff, and with in collaboration with Kat and AJ, constructing this huge set in Studio One, and this idea that MPAC is itself a body, with these different parts of it, and how bodies change and bodies can evolve, and this idea that also this project has evolved. Mm-hmm. I mean, without giving you, setting off any panic. Can you talk about how that project grew? Maybe unexpectedly.
And very, very excitingly. I mean, the MPAC staff is so great. The production team. When that moment came where we were like, wait a second, I think this is a house rather than a bunch of screens in a room. The house is essentially a series of walls, right? Or a house is. And so, you know, it is in a way still a bunch of screens in a room, but they are shaped in a particular way. There's a staircase, right? There's these other elements that sort of make it recognizable as a home. And the MPAC staff was just like, that's interesting and new and different and much bigger, but here's a design, basically, you know? And so it's so special to be able to have a conversation with an artist that really like allows them to grapple with the ideas they are interested in and not start from the place of like, how small can it be, but actually how big can it be? And it might have to get a little smaller than that. You know, I mean, always there's certain things where we say, actually, we can't do that in the time frame or whatever. But to have it be possible to have that conversation in the first place is really powerful.
I mean, and it's not, sorry to jump in, but it's not necessarily big or small for the sake of being big or small.
No.
It's always in the service of this concept. And so it seems to me, you know, having walked into Studio One when this was all happening, and you know, you turning to me is like, okay, this is different. This is definitely, you know, a slightly larger scale than, you know, than I anticipated. But it seemed to really serve the project. It really seemed to kind of underline and heighten some of these narrative threads that you were talking about.
Absolutely. So they started this project, you know, for the screen, and not just to be screened in a space, but actually because it was COVID, like really for people to be able to screen in their own homes, right, on a computer. And so the frame has always been very important. And the videos that they created back then, a few years ago, were essentially still frames in a sort of public urban space in Chicago. And each of them are responding to different prompts that are, they call them how-tos. So the whole project is themed around the idea of, and it comes from a piece of Blondell Cummings, choreographer Blondell Cummings' work, but, you know, how to live a sort of rich Black domestic life is the through line of these prompts that they're doing, and they respond physically to the prompts in the videos, and they're just sort of there in this frame that doesn't move, right? So their bodies move within it. They enter and exit sometimes. They gesture. They, you know, respond to that comment, that line, you know, each of the how-tos. And so in translating it to a theatrical space, even if it is an incredibly flexible theatrical space like Studio One, I think the urge to have not only literally a domestic space, which was more subtext, I think, in the videos originally, they wanted to be able to, and thinking as movers, right? They wanted to be able to inhabit that world in some way, and then still have that sort of outdoor video work that they had originally made show up and be present. It's like how to frame the frame of the original videos, and then how to frame their bodies. And so essentially the walls of the house, a couple of them are screens. And then, you know, there's a small screen also on stage, a monitor on stage. But they are doing these sort of vignettes that
they're performing.
They're performing on that first day, I think about 10 to 15 times. Some of them are really short. Some of them are, you know, maybe the longest is 20 minutes, in that range. But they are making use of the lighting design, you know, like that theatrical lighting that is possible in a black box in a particular way. They are making use of that sort of detailed cueing of videos in tandem with light, you know, like all of that stuff is there. And that's been really beautiful to watch them think about and draw on their expertise, you know, to create. They're really like living inside this house, you know? And then also they're present when they're not there because the videos are there. And so it's drawing it, you know, it was always sort of time-based, of course, but it's drawing it out in this sort of multifaceted way that just wasn't able to happen before. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned theatricality earlier. It's very that, right?
Right.
It went from this sort of, these pale, sort of a gray day, these videos that were shot, in 2021 or whatever, to this really rich sort of palette of lighting design and props everywhere, they do basically different tasks around the home space, and string those together in response to each of these how-tos. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as far as this kind of development process, I just want to touch based on some of your programming, Katherine. I know that, for instance, P staff is in conversation with our video team to really think about these concepts of surveillance.
Yeah,
scanning.
Totally. Sure. Yeah, I can speak a little to that. And thanks, Tara, for walking us through. I love hearing about how the festival's coming together.
Oh yeah, we're not done with you, Tara.
Yes, we have to come back.
One question.
Yeah, we have to come back to Tara. But yes, totally. I can speak to P staff because actually there may be a portion of that. We're sort of finalizing some of the design for it now, but there's a portion where P is working with kind of an enclosure, but a lot of that project is going to be with thermal cameras. And so P is really interested in processes of moving image that are not traditionally filmic in the sense that they don't require light to pass through like an aperture in the way that a traditional camera does. So they're very interested in forms of scanning in a way the thermal camera scans the body for heat. A lot of medical images scan our bodies, x-rays. So we've been thinking a lot about kind of also what the spatial traces and forms of those things are. The scanning seems to capture like an emission from the body that, traditional film doesn't. But in relation to surveillance too, we've been thinking a lot about what we are calling like the sort of gentle touch of surveillance. Like it scans your movement, it kind of probes the body in a certain way. So some of what we've been talking through is kind of how some of these scanning strategies really cross the line from like a kind of care focused, like medical kind of tool to something that is really about like sort of gently watching all the time to sort of collect information. So,
and what kind of technology? Are you using different kinds of cameras?
Yeah, so thermal camera is one, and then we'll also be using LiDAR, which is kind of it's sort of distance-based. I don't know exactly how it works on the back
end. Our
end,
research engineer, Sam Chavit, said that it's the little sensor on our phone is actually LiDAR.
Wow. Yeah.
The sensor on the back with the cameras.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and supposedly like an old Radiohead music video was also filmed with LiDAR, so nice. It has a certain aesthetic. But yeah, so that's one. And then there may be some sort of parallel like sound inquiry in that residency too that we're sort of working out. Yeah.
And then the other development residency is Korakrit with the fog wall.
Yeah, so there's a couple. I'd say Korakrit is, yes, the fog wall. So Korakrit, Korakrit does both sort of video and performance work. And they're very interested in this idea of like possession and the ghostliness of images. So in addition to like thinking about cinema as this kind of haunting, Korakrit's also thinking about like the film kind of possessing the space in which it's screened. So there's like a kind of, spiritual, mythological side to that, but it's also, he's really also thinking of it like on a technical level too, like through the use of atmospherics, like the fog curtain. And so one of the questions for him is like, how can we make performing bodies seem to like blend into this footage of performers? So a lot of the use of fog will be to also like help transition from like the live to the like ghost recording and things like that. Yeah.
That's great.
And just to come back to this idea of theatricality again, I mentioned I had commissioned a new piece. The title of that piece is Ontopoiesis, by composer Rama Gottfried. And and it's a experimental music theater piece I mentioned the rigging system kind of creating this morphing scenography. And I'm really interested in the ways that sort of expanded forms of chamber music can really kind of revitalize a tradition that's, hundreds of years old. But it seems like our theater is getting a lot of mileage this spring.
Yes.
Maybe talk a little bit more about sort of the production aspects of Jack Ferver's.
Sure. That one actually, in some ways, because it is going to be that work will tour. It's a co-commission with Skirball at NYU. There's certain aspects of that are maybe more akin to like the use of a traditional proscenium theater. But yeah, so that project will be in the theater. And some of the main questions for Jack are like how to integrate the use of like kind of video throughout the piece, because there will be basically the set design is essentially this video scenography that their partners is working on, Jeremy Jacob. So yeah, I think that's a case of us sort of using the theater to both think through the coherence of the work in and of itself, and also imagine how it will exist in its future forms too. Right. So that's, I mean, we've talked about this, I think, in the past on our podcast.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there's nothing wrong with the traditional use of the theater.
No.
Yeah.
I think, Rama's piece is very, front-facing traditional in that way. Like, some of your projects, we're throwing everything at the wall. We've got, without giving too much away, we've got confetti, smoke machines, fog machines, bubbles machines, all the machines, the constantly shifting rigging system, lights, live camera on stage, projections, all the things. And, those are things that MPAC can really offer. And so, I know that Leslie's piece, Tara, will also be in the theater. We're curtaining off the proscenium, right, to create an actual black box for her piece. And you'd mentioned this kind of like floating chamber kind of effect. Yeah, it's funny. The two pieces that week, the one in Studio One is basically like we built a house which has a front, and the audience will view it very clearly from that side. So it has this proscenium like aspect to it, though they'll be able to wander through when it's more in installation mode. And then the one that's in the theater, Lesie Cuyjet, we're using it as a black box. So it's a little bit like, switching up. But yeah, it's really like a cube of white, of sort of translucent plastic around Lesie, and inside of it, there's projection that happens on its surface. There's a side of it that's more open and where she's more visible, and then there's sides where she's more invisible, or at least you're looking through something that's a little more altered. And the audience can wander around on the outside, so there will be a lot of choices that people can make, I think, about how they witness her. And then there's choices that she has sort of made for you, where people tend to gather around the side that's more where she's more visible, where the plastic is more translucent than on the more opaque sides. But there's, she's also playing with camera. Like there's a camera that she's using from inside to project herself, live, as well as pre-recorded footage and archival footage. So I think that point you were making, Katherine, about not nearly as cool as a fog wall, but just trying to sort of play with the relationship between the physical body that's present, the performer in the moment, and then the projection of their image, and the question of scale that can kind of happen with that. There's also a moment in AJ and Katherine Reynolds' piece, not a projected body versus a live performer so much, but there is this small monitor. There's a really beautiful moment that happens with shadow and like seeing a body somewhere else and also where it is at the same time. And I won't give too much away, but so I think that is something that video is giving to a lot of these artists, is being able to sort of work with
I don't want to say like fantastical is not quite the right word, but just the sort of illusion that's possible with light and image that isn't possible with just the body itself, but also with a real intention to like work with the live performer as well.
Great. So without giving too much away, I think we've talked about sort of what's happening this season. Before we go, I was wondering if there's any last things you'd like to add, maybe what you're most excited for. It doesn't have to be of a particular program, but maybe what's coming up for you. I mean, I will just say for me, I'm excited to see your work.
Likewise.
And I mean, I just think it's like another great sort of varied season of offerings. I'm excited that all of the work that I'm bringing is a bit in the words of my homeland of Oakland. It's a bit hyphy. It's like it's very hype. It's very active. It's very it's like extremely engaging. I think the music offerings I've curated this upcoming season, so I'm excited for the energy coming up. How about you all?
Yeah, I feel similarly, and I'm also excited for like a larger scale convening. I mean, we've done festivals in the past, but I'm really looking forward to sort of being able to experience like multiple projects kind of in the same container, so to speak, and see how they speak to each other and, you know, how artists are coming together around that. So yeah, I think that's one thing I'm really excited about.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. It's I think something that MPAC is really well situated for, to be, you know, we have so many different spaces, so we can hold different kinds of work all at once and get people to come from around the region, you know, to see, you know, get that draw of seeing more than one work. So it's exciting. That's probably my thing. I don't know. I'm excited to hang out with like 6 different artists at once too. Yeah. That's always cool.
It's really cool. And I know you're probably going to share ideas, share meals, and also, you know, it's going to be great to have, like Katherine mentioned, just all these people gathering in one place and seeing all these events.
And share meals with you all in the audience too, because we will need, you know, it's a marathon, right?
Yeah.
Multiple events. So we will be taking a snack break with you all.
Love a reception.
Love a reception.
Love a meal break.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think we have an exciting season coming up. So I want to thank both of you, Katherine and Tara, for sitting down and giving our audiences a little preview of what's to come. So thanks for sitting down with us.
Thank you both.
Thanks for listening. In Production is produced by the audio, video, and curatorial teams here at MPAC. Both a Center for Media and the Performing Arts and a research and production facility, MPAC at Rensselaer hosts artists and residents year-round to support the realization of complex artworks and research projects at any stage from inception to completion. To find out more about MPAC, visit www.mpac.rpi.edu and our Instagram account at EMPAC_RPI. All opinions expressed here belong solely to those featured in this episode and are not representative of Rensselaer.